Hello and very warm welcome to the Arise interview, 60 minutes of multifaceted discussions where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and we feature the voices at the heart of the stories. I am Christian Ogodo. Thanks for joining us. Coming up in the next hour, the People's Democratic Party has reacted to the Supreme Court's judgment on the Imo State Governorship election. The party described the judgment as yet another very sad commentary on the nation's democratic order and wants the judgment delivered by the apex court to be reviewed and reversed. The party says it is grieved with the Supreme Court's decision and yet to come to terms with the rationale for awarding victory to Senator Uzodinma after the tribunal and the courts of appeal had affirmed Emeka Ihedioha as the duly elected governor of the state. Today, we'll assess the demand of the main opposition party, the PDP, just in a moment. And later, cartoons have over the years become very prominent features of newspapers and magazines that some of them are sought by readers for their cartoons. Cartoon as a means of communication has no doubt become an indispensable part of modern journalism. It can be seen as a humorous representation or symbolic drawings that entertain, teach, or enlighten. A cartoon can be slanted towards political, social, or economic issues, and that is what Mustafa Bulama, a self-taught political cartoonist and illustrator, does. We'll speak to the award-winning political cartoonist himself, all in a moment. As you may have heard, the Supreme Court has voided the election of Emeka Ihedioha as the governor of Imo State. The apex court says Emeka of the People's Democratic Party did not score the majority of the lawful votes in the March 9th governorship election and orders that Senator Hope Uzodinma of the APC be sworn in as a duly elected governor of the state. The court orders have, of course, been obeyed. Now, the PDP national chairman says the party no longer has confidence in the current leadership of the Supreme Court on its ability to deliver justice on the remaining governorship appeals before the apex court. The PDP lamented that the people's collective destiny has been taken from the governor they chose and handed over to someone and a political party that the residents do not want.
We are confirmed by two concurrent judgments of both the tribunal and the court of appeal. And in the tradition is that the Supreme Court hardly tamper with such decision except it was found to be perverse. What was the evidence of the perversity? It is important to also bring to the consciousness of well-meaning members of the public, especially the press, particularly Nigerians, that there were two elections in March, on March 9, 2019, namely governorship and the House of Assembly. As already known, there was only one accreditation for the two elections. The APC did not win any of the 27 seats in the Imo State House of Assembly, which were won as follows. PDP won 13 seats, AA won 8, ABGA won 6, APC 0, total 27. The above further question and confront the rationale for the judgment of the Supreme Court on Imo State. How then did the Supreme Court arrive at its decision to allocate results to void a lawful governorship election and impose an unelected person as a governor? The fact is that the Supreme Court, as presently constituted under Justice Tanko, has lost its credibility and no longer commands the respect and confidence of Nigerians. If the people no longer reimpose confidence in the Supreme Court, then our democracy, national cohesion, and stability are at a great risk. The constitution of the panel that had the appeal itself was a product of drama. The panel was changed 3 times, and any judge that shows signs of not agreeing to modern democracy, in this case, was promptly removed by the CGN. The result had to be ominous to satisfy the script of rationality. But can any judge who sat on that panel go home?
Well, for more on this story, I've now been joined from our Lagos studios by the indefatigable Femi Falana, who is a human rights activist and senior advocate of Nigeria. Very warm welcome, Mr. Falana, to the Arise interview. May I just start first with this salvo? Why is the Supreme Court judgment on the Imo governorship election generating so much acrimony or brouhaha?
Mbaka, who had predicted that Uzodinma was going to become the governor with mathematical exactitude. Everybody has been taken unawares by the judgment of the Supreme Court. But I think it is important for us, sentiments apart, to await the decision of this, the reasons for the judgment of the Supreme Court. That is the way I think we should approach this matter, and this is the way it is done in civilized societies, and this is the way it was done in Nigeria before now. We have had many cases where the Supreme Court had given decisions that Nigerians were not expecting. Going back to the Second Republic, I mean, you remember the 12 to 3rd, scenario, or even in 2015, when the Supreme Court disagreed with the legal position that the card reader, was legal. The Supreme Court said no. And some of those who are criticizing the Supreme Court now were celebrating the decision at that material time.
So you think, Mr. Falana, you think that the Supreme Court judgment on the Imo governorship election is very congenial for the jurisprudence of Nigerian law, or for the political jurisprudence, of our democracy?
Now, I would rather talk about the jurisprudence rather than the political, implications. The politicians can, deal with the politics of it. But talking of the law, we have to appreciate certain development in this case. And I think we are not asking the relevant question. Nigeria is the only country in the world, or rather, Nigeria has the highest cases of electoral disputes in the world. Our candidates or aspirants for elections in Nigeria are determined by the courts, not necessarily by the electorate, not the members of the party, because the leaders have a way of imposing candidates on the electorate, and people go to court, and the courts are then forced to determine who the candidates are. After the election, we also go to tribunal, and it is the tribunal that will determine who won an election, not the electorate. So you have what I had regarded as tribunalization of our democracy. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. where the courts are saddled with the responsibility to determine who won election. No doubt there are election disputes, a couple of disputes here and there, but Nigeria is the only one where you may have 1,500 election disputes, and there is no way the courts can come out clean, because judges are not trained essentially to determine the winners of election. And so when these facts are brought, when the evidence is laid before the courts have no choice but to deal and arrive at conclusions based on the evidence before them. In this case, INEC disregarded results from 388 units. That has not been disputed, that was what happened. Of course, the tribunal upheld the position of INEC. But at the Court of Appeal, there was a split decision of 2 judges to 1. So it was the majority decision of the Court of Appeal that upheld the election of Mr. Emeka Ihedioha. At the Supreme Court, the minority decision of the Court of Appeal was upheld, as it were. In other words, the results of the 388 units, they were disregarded by the INEC, disregarded by the tribunal, upheld by the minority judgment of the Court of Appeal, was the basis of the decision of the Supreme Court. In other words, ab initio, from the election petition filed by Senator Hope Uzodinma, I have read and have confirmed that the prayer he was seeking was to be declared the winner on the ground that the result of those 388 units be upheld and confirmed. The INEC did not, from what I've read, did not really challenge his claim. Others simply disregarded him, and he went on to pursue the matter. The alternative relief he was asking was that the election be annulled, but I think along the way his lawyers dropped that and continued to pursue the fact that INEC illegally, unquote, canceled the result of the 388 units. Now, at the tribunal, Hope Uzodinma brought witnesses, his agents, to tender the results of those units. A policeman was also brought to tender the copies given to the police. And that is the basis of decision of the Supreme Court. Whether we agree with the Supreme Court or not,
Mr. Falana, I would want you to just pause there while we'll go on a short break to take some messages. I think you've situated the point. When we return, we'll still be inquiring more why the APC says they suffered the same fate in Zamfara, and the PDP, the main losers in this, want the Supreme Court to reverse. Mr. Falana, thanks for still being with us. Let us look at the argument of the All Progressives Congress, the ruling party, arising from the Supreme Court judgment. They are saying that, well, they suffered the same fate in the Zamfara elections, where they won virtually the governorship seat and the House of Assembly and the rest. But the Supreme Court ruled that they had no candidates because their internal election processes did not follow the guidelines and the rest. Can these two scenarios be, compared and say they are the same? Are they the same in any way?
Well, I think both the PDP and the APC we'll have to appreciate the position of the courts in a democracy, and particularly when the Supreme Court has given a decision. You may not like it, you may disagree with the judgment, but like we say in legal parlance, if your client loses in the Supreme Court and he asks you, what next? Is appeals lies with the Almighty God. And it did happen in America when you had the Gore-Bush election dispute. And by the time the Supreme Court gave its decision, like a civilized politician, Gore said, even though I disagree with the judgment, but that is the decision of the Supreme Court of America, and I'm bound by it. Now, this business of attacking and demonizing the Supreme Court, even where it makes errors, it's not the best for democracy. When you had the Sanfara case, where because of the internal wrangling of the APC, the Supreme Court declared that the APC, even though it won all the elections, didn't have any candidates in the election. The PDP celebrated and commended, the court for reinforcing democracy and for teaching a lesson, dealing with godfathers and imposition of candidates. This time around, the APC is celebrating while the PDP is demonizing the Supreme Court. For me, it's not correct. It's not the right attitude. We must learn as sportsmen and women to accept defeat when the facts are before us. And I've listened to some of the PDP leaders. If you want to have a review of the decision of the Supreme Court, by all means, please get your facts together, collate the provisions of the law and get your lawyers to file the appropriate application by asking the court for a review of his decision on certain grounds, and it's allowed under our law.
And the Supreme Court, with such evidence put forward, can reverse itself, Mr. Falana, in this case?
Of course. No, of course, the Supreme Court, may have cause to reverse itself if it is convinced that it didn't apply the law properly, it made errors in the calculation, because they are also human beings.
Yes, indeed, they are human beings. Mr. Falana, let us look at some other socio-economic fallouts in the country. And it's the belief of Nigerians, or most Nigerians, or some Nigerians and other analysts, that they've been boxed to a corner economically, socio-economically, and the rest. First is that the likes of vociferous, vocal activists like you seem to have gone to sleep, only issuing statements, from the comfort of your homes. You've been to prison, several times, not as a convict, but as a detainee of government for your socio-political activism in the years past, some 20 years ago. What has changed?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, nothing has changed. I've remained as constant as the Northern Star in terms of, defending the rule of law, constitutionalism, human rights, and democracy. Nothing has changed. In fact, these days, as if we are under the military, people warn me to be very careful in my ways. Oh, that you are too critical of the government. And I tell them, this was not the rickety democracy we're fighting for.
And today?
So nothing has changed as far as
I remember a few years ago, Mr. Falana, you and others during the administration of President Jonathan then shut down Nigeria for weather issues of, particularly during the petroleum price increase and the rest. And Nigeria really, came to its knees and the rest. We have seen some breaches here and there that the likes of you or even Professor Wole Soyinka would make big news leading street protests and the rest. We don't see that anymore. That's what, the people are saying.
I think some of you guys will have to be fair to us. When the cabal, the Yaradua cabal, said that President Jonathan, the then vice president, will not assume power, we went on the street. We went on the street. And when we had cause to also challenge the government, we went on the street. And to say we have not been challenging the Buhari regime, I mean, it's bonkun. It's bonkun. It's nonsensical. And I can assure you, very soon, the people of Nigeria will have to take their political destiny in their own hand. But please, for heaven's sake, let nobody feel that there are a few Nigerians who are to be on the street on a permanent basis. The country belongs to all of us. We mustn't be looking for heroes. We should all be activists against corruption, official corruption, against impunity, against detention without trial, against disobedience of court orders, and against manipulation of election results.
Well, these people really look up to the likes of you, to galvanize them, to rally around them and the rest. But let's move away from that. You've said that very soon.
We are working on that, I can assure you. We are working on that, I can assure you. And I do hope that when we call out people very soon, they will respond positively.
All right, Mr. Falana, there's one other real issue that has assumed national discourse in the last 72 hours, Amotekun security outfit by the Southwest governors or regions, and the federal government declaring it as illegal. Is that correct? Legally? I mean...
No, I wouldn't agree with you. I wouldn't agree with you that the federal government has declared Amotekun illegal. If you say the Attorney General of the federal government, Mr. Abubakar Malami SAN, declare Amotekun illegal, I will agree with you. But the Inspector General of Police had met with the representatives of the governors, Governor Kayode Fayemi, who also doubles as the chair of the Nigerian Governors Forum on Amotekun. That was before the launch. And they had a robust discussion. At the end of the debate, the meeting, the Inspector General of Police was said to have ratified the security initiative. And that was why the Amotekun was launched. With respect to Mr. Malami's rather outlandish, submission on the security of the country or the defense of the country, I think there is a problem. When somebody challenges the corporate existence of Nigeria, the facts will be clear. In this case, the governors of the Southwest are simply saying, we want to have a security outfit that will assist the police, and other security forces that have proven capable or unable to guarantee the life and property of every citizen, living in the southwest part of the country. And there's nothing new about it. Because in the northwest, we have the East Bar, in the northeast, we have the civilian JTF, So if even in Lagos State, we have the neighborhood watch. But again, I've also submitted that police powers in Nigeria are not the exclusive preserve of the president of Nigeria or the federal government. They are shared. Police powers are supposed to be shared by the president, the 36 state governors, the Inspector General of Police, and the chairman, police council. Those are the members of the Nigerian Police Council. It is that body that will organize, that will administer and supervise the Nigerian police force. Unfortunately, since 1999, those police powers have been abdicated, have been usurped by the presidency. And that's why we're in this mess of insecurity all over the place.
Seems to be challenging such situations and the rest. And they just let it go, is it?
No, I think with profound respect, the Attorney General of the country, of the federal government, because we don't have an Attorney General of the Federation. It's a misnomer. We have the Attorney General of the federal government, just like each state government in Nigeria has its own Attorney General. The declaration by Mr. Malami cannot stand the test of time. If he's convinced that the Amotekun initiative is illegal, he will have to go to court. Only a court of law can, with categorical pronouncement, say that a body is illegal.
All right. Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, I would really have loved to continue this line of discussion with you on the Arise interview, but we're going to let you go now. And thanks so very much indeed for joining us on the Arise interview.